Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome here to another live session. I am incredibly excited to have Joy Savill here with us today. Now, Joy, I have known for a number of years, and I remember seeing her as a mentor and a coach and a really successful property investor and being in awe of her. And now I'm really excited to say that she's actually a really good mate now. And so I'm very, very fortunate to have known Joy for a while now. And and we've sort of grown in our property journey as well. But what I was really excited to share about Joy is the fact that she has just launched her Auction Queen subscription service. And obviously she does mentoring and all of those other things as well. So so welcome, Joy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Joy, for anyone who perhaps doesn't know you or hasn't come across you yet, do you want to just give a very brief introduction to yourself, and then we'll deep dive into more about you after that?
Yeah, so I'm a property and estate planning lawyer. So I help people buy properties, but I also help them pay as little inheritance tax as we can possibly make it, subject, of course, to the current government's decisions to change all that, which will be interesting to learn in the next few months. I'm a property investor and coach and mentor. So I've been mentoring for a number of years now, as you rightly say, with a big company. I'm now no longer working with them, and I work more specifically with investors for their knotty legal problems. So if they're doing title splits and auction properties and the awkward bits of property that make our property investor journey much more viable, because we know someone who can solve a problem. And there are many problems that I can solve, short leases and so forth. And again, that's another thing that we expect to see interesting amendments in this current government, leasehold properties. So.
Absolutely. So there's loads of changes going on, isn't
Yes,
there?
yes, loads of changes.
I think it's really hard for the average person to keep up with so much kind of buy-to-let legislation, as you say, title splitting, all of these different rules and regulations and changes, planning. There's an awful lot of planning things that are promised and then they're taken away, and then the EPC, and then it's not happening, and then it is, and it's really hard for people to keep up to date.
I mean, at the moment, everybody's talking about the abolition of Section 21, and they seem to have missed the fact it hasn't been done. It's a bill that's going through Parliament. Yes, the likelihood is it will get done, because we know that the government has got a huge majority, and therefore they whip everybody to support it. Then that will happen. But it isn't at the moment. So I'm getting asked constantly about rules and things. Well, there's nothing, because we don't know what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. So there's no way around it until they've done it.
Absolutely.
If there's a way around it.
Exactly. And I'm always a huge fan of, until it actually comes into play, like, I don't really worry about it too much, because otherwise we'd just be constantly sort of terrified. Yeah. So let's jump into this then. So let's hear a little bit about your property journey, because I literally describe you as like a walking brain. You are so knowledgeable about so many things. It's absolutely incredible. So just share a little bit about your journey, how you perhaps quickly how you got into property, and also conveyancing.
So conveyancing, I sort of fell into it. I had to leave my first career many years ago now, and I learned to be retrained to be a secretary. Got a job in a legal office, which by just accident was a conveyancing office, and realised that conveyancing was my point of genius. I remembered everything. it makes complete sense to me, and I find it difficult to understand why it didn't particularly make sense to other people, and how property investors don't know the basics bothered me for many years. You think you've done this 2 or 3 times a year, you must know how it works, and they don't. And I watch clients increasing their wealth. I won't say getting rich, because there are other things to do. Increasing their wealth with property. And my husband wanted to buy property from investment property from quite a young age, and because I did it every day, so after I'd been a secretary for a while, I left work to have a family, and whilst I was off, I qualified as a lawyer. So that was my that was my maternity leave. It was several years, granted, but I then qualified as a lawyer and worked my way up. I headed a department for a number of years. I'm not a solicitor. I'm a chartered legal executive because of how I qualified differently. I headed up a conveyancing department for a number of years, and then became a partner in that firm. And I was one of the first chartered legal executives in the company to become a partner, which it was within the first year of the change of law. So I worked as the compliance officer legal practice, and continued to practice what we call private client law, which is trusts and stuff like that, and property, which is, as I said, makes complete sense. At about 2008, I was persuaded by my husband that I would buy an investment property, and we bought our first investment property on the condition I had nothing to do with it, because I did it all day long and I didn't want anything to do with it.
Joy, you've got to stop rustling. You're rustling or something.
Sorry.
We can hear some background noise.
And that didn't work. It's my point of genius. I can't actually not have anything to do with it. And then we all know what happened in 2008. I think we purchased in early 2008, late 2007. And I got frightened by seeing what was happening. And then things changed for me, and I left the firm I was a partner with for varying reasons. And I went to work somewhere else and got sent to a property networking meeting for one of the large property networking companies. And and the rest is history, really. I realised how lucrative it was, and how much I knew, and we started to invest then, and we've bought and sold varying properties over the last 10 years now.
Amazing. And so, yeah, so Joy and please, guys, I'll ask a few questions. Please do let us know where you are calling in from today. So when you were listening, please do drop in the chat, whereabouts are you? And then Joy will know whether there's any Welsh or Scottish contingencies here. But yeah, do let us know. So do write that in there. So so obviously Joy and I actually met at Touchstone Education, where we both were mentors for many years, and we are still very much part of the community, and further afield. So you did a lot of training with Progressive as well, and many others. So I know that you are very well known. So we've got some people from Manchester. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry it doesn't say your name on here. I'm not sure why. So Joy, obviously, we know that you are, incredibly knowledgeable, especially that you have that advantage of knowing, the conveyancing side as well, which is really quite phenomenal. So Auction Queen, this is why we're here today. And I have been literally knowing Joy's incredible knowledge, and she spoke to me about this quite a while ago, and I've been going, you got to do it, it's so great, it's such a great thing, and I'm so excited that you are now absolutely out there and smashing it. I've heard so many fantastic reviews from you. So what is Auction Queen? Tell us about that, please.
So Auction Queen is my concerns. It started out of my concerns for people who read auction packs themselves and don't understand the process, therefore make mistakes and lose money on their deposits. And that's happened to me once in 30 odd years. And that was a client who hadn't read the auction pack, or had read the auction pack himself and not had a lawyer check it over. And there were some massive gaping flaws in it that revealed themselves. So I wanted to be able to help people, because the main thing that I see when I sit down and talk to people at networking meetings and so forth is that I have, what do they want? They want me to download my 30 years experience, or it's more than 30, into their brain so that I can tell them they know exactly what to read in auction packs, and that doesn't work. We can't do that. I'd love to do that, but I can't, because there are little things, and I still learn things. It's not there are things you go, well, I've never seen that before, and believe you me, they do happen. And so from that point of view, I wanted to be able to at least impart a little bit to de-risk some of the myths around auctions and about how much what you need to be looking for. And because I really appreciate that if you're going to go through every property in an auction, and sometimes there are hundreds if you look at some of Allsops and things like that, you don't want to pay someone to look at every pack. And so I wanted to get a set of rules going so people understood that it isn't always easy to do that, and that you might think, actually, that one's worth sending to a lawyer to look at. This one isn't, or I don't understand what that bit means, or I do understand what that bit means. Now, you can look at an auction pack and there can be virtually nothing in it, but there are often, really difficult bits that people don't get, like, are you missing rights of way? Where's the property? I did one recently. So Auction Queen is we have 2 sessions a month on our Essentials membership, where we have question and answers for 2 hours on a month, for 2 hours, one hour each, on a Monday night, and people can bring their auction packs and we sit and talk through them. Now, my hope there, and I seem to be proving right, is that people see the auction pack and they're getting a chance to look at other people's auction packs and going, oh, I see. So she said something about that. Is that right? Now, it's not legal advice. It's me looking at something that would probably take me 2 hours, and I might spend 15 to 20 minutes on it, on the call, going, well, there's a problem here and I would need to ask questions about that. Or you can open it up and go, there's nothing wrong with this. It's a dead flat title, and they are rare in auctions, because that's the other thing, is that, if we can't find the reason why it's in an auction, then need to be looking, is there a little something somebody's hiding?
Yeah.
And why are people trying to get it into an auction?
Absolutely. And I think that's so key. So, I'm definitely on these calls as much as I can with Joy, because it really is an incredible learning. Because, as I say, with so many circumstances, you just don't know what you don't know. And you could be reading through this, and we've done this a number of times, Joy, where you've been reading through and you've gone, oh, well, this is an issue, and I've barely even seen that. So, it really is so complex, and you can absolutely see why, you need to pay, a considerable amount of money for solicitors to check over these auction packs, because it can be, you know, a really concerning place to be. So please, guys, please put a 1 in the chat if you have ever bought at auction, or you would like to buy at auction. Please do share that with us so we have an understanding. So Joy, for those who are kind of new to property auctions, what would you say are kind of the key maybe things in an auction pack to pay attention to?
Well, does the property belong to the person who's selling it?
That's quite an important one.
Quite an important one.
Take that for granted then.
And well, no, because that was in the one that for me that didn't make it. That was the main problem to start off with. It delayed it to start off with because you couldn't see who it was. And to be fair, I've just been given one to look at for a client, which I was working on before we started. And that isn't, the seller isn't the named owner either. There is a document in there to confirm why the seller isn't the named owner, but it's very basic. And it's no good saying, well, it's not the named owner, but that person's selling it. Well, the land registry take a very different view to that, and they go, why is he selling it? Prove that he had the right to sell it. And that must be in the auction pack if it's not there. But people don't look at that. They look at they think the property is the most important, but that's the thing to start with, and to make sure you understand who's selling it. In this particular case, the one I'm talking about now, that I'm looking at the moment, there's a grant of letters of administration in there, so it's being sold by a personal representative. However, there may be that in the one that I'm talking about earlier, there was nothing in the auction pack to say how this person had authority to sell it. So it's really important to see that. So that's number one. And if it's not there, the first thing to do there, before you waste any time on it, is go back to the auctioneer and ask them why. Because the auctioneers upload the auction packs and they don't check them. So if there's something missing in it, they don't know, because they haven't looked at them. That isn't what they do. They don't check them. They get sent an auction pack, they upload it, and it's...
So that's really interesting. So you would have thought, wouldn't you? Because I think, you know, most of us are used to buying through, you know, Rightmove, Zoopla, and they obviously are really quite heavily checked to go on to those. They sort of check them, and they make sure. And obviously, generally, you'd hope that the agent has attended the property, and they might take, you know, the floor plan and things like that. So what you're saying is the vendor generally will create the auction pack and send it in to the auction house, and then they don't necessarily even check it.
They don't necessarily even check it, but most estate agents don't check who's on the title. So they don't get it. It would make sense, and everybody would think this, that estate agents would look at the land registry on the property they're selling. They don't. They believe what the land registry tells. They believe what the person selling the property tells them. So if the person hasn't told them they don't own it, they won't know. So they will. It can get as far as Rightmove on an ordinary, you know, private sale, treaty for sale. It can still get on an auction pack. So it still can get on the Rightmove. So please don't think, never assume it. It would be your solicitor it will be something they check, obviously, when they look at it. I had one recently where the seller had got married, so I had a different name. I mean, it was fairly obvious it was the same person, but the land registry don't work on those principles, so I had to obtain her marriage certificate. So it isn't generally, that's one of the first things we check, which is one of the things you forget. So yeah, that's an important one. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, carry on. You were saying the second one.
The second thing to check is that there's a registered plan in the title pack,
So just to so for those people who might not know what a registered plan is, what does that mean?
So when you download title documents from the land registry, which is I'm being very simplistic here, because there are still some unregistered properties around, but in most cases now, most properties are registered. So the solicitor or yourself, if you decide to do that, will download the land registry entries, which when I was a girl they called office copies, and I still tend to do that, which I try not to. But they download the land registry up, and they come in two parts: the register and the plan. So if you should be only paying £3 for each one. Please don't go paying money for land registry titles on anything other than the gov.gov website, because they charge a surcharge.
Yeah.
So,
and it's very simple, isn't it? So if it's not a simple process, you're in the wrong place. I bought one last night, in fact.
Yes.
It is, really simple. So, I know sometimes there are third parties, aren't they, that charge extra. Make sure it is the government website. It looks like the government website.
It's landregistry.gov.uk, and it is £3 for each part. So £3 for the register and £3 for the plan. So I would expect. So the second thing I'd do is look at the plan and make sure the plan reflects what you're expecting to buy. So is that red line? The land registry occasionally ask about buildings on the site, but they are not that bothered. The red line is the area in which the property stands. So the red line you would expect to see is the garden, and you wouldn't expect to see any more than that. So those two things is the property. So you've got your register, which shows the name of the person who's buying it, selling it, or who owns it, and the contract, which should show the person who's selling it. So those two need to match, and the title plan needs to show what you expect you're going to buy. If you haven't visited the property, at least look on Street View and Google Earth and things, and make sure that that's what you're expecting to buy. Obviously, visiting the property is the best, but that's not always possible, I know, with other people. But you can get the people who go and view it for you. I've forgotten what they're called.
Viewer. So you can get viewer, can't you? Or I always find as well, I think it's a really great point, Joy, is most of us have got fellow property investors all over the country, and especially newbies. That's really exciting experience for them to go and look at properties for others. So again, that's a really great sort of opportunity. But if not, Viewer is the name of it. View as in VIEWBER. So amazing, Joy. So I love that. But what are the kind of common pitfalls do you sort of see people falling into if they don't thoroughly read their auction pack? Now, please, if I may, add one in here. So I've got a chap who was kind of sent over to me by some professionals because they were quite worried that this particular chap didn't seem to know exactly what he'd bought. And I was really shocked when I went and visited him at the property, because he needed a bit of guidance of what to do. I mean, potentially it could have been a pretty good deal, but he knew absolutely nothing. And I was saying, what are the, what's the square meterage? What's this? Because that kind of helps you. It was actually a mixed use. So it was shop and uppers. So shop with flats above. And he had no idea. And then I asked a couple more questions, and I said, he said, I don't know, I haven't seen any of that detail. And I said, well, it would have all been in the auction pack. He said, I didn't read that.
Yes.
I was like, what?
What you have to understand is that when the hammer goes down,
yeah,
on the on the end of the auction, you have exchanged contracts. You cannot say, "Oh, I've changed my mind now. I don't know what I've bought," or and exchange of contracts is at that point legally binding. You've lost your deposit, and you could also be sued for the breaches from any losses stemming from the breaches of that contract. So if somebody has lost out on something, or they sell it again for less money, it will always be you are liable for those breaches. So really, you need to be certain on that. You need to be certain on what you've bought. You need to have read the auction pack. You need to have looked at the special conditions, because the special conditions can double the price of your property.
And so is there like a particular place that people might find these special conditions?
They should all be in the auction pack. So when you go in, when you go to the auction, it says download the auction pack. And when you download the auction pack, one of the documents should be the special conditions. And that will include everything in the auction pack that which should have, I personally often, if I'm auctioning, don't put property information forms in. I like to see them when my clients are buying, but when they're selling, I try and get away with it. It is what it is. But you must, usually you would like to see searches in the auction pack. That's becoming less and less popular. People don't do that. You would expect, if there are searches, that the special conditions will have a clause which will remunerate the buyer for the seller for paying for the searches. You may see a clause for their legal fees in there. You will see the fee for the notice to complete if it has to be served. You will also see any other, and I've seen rent arrears. So you could be liable for rent arrears. Enormous amounts of other charges, like they may have had the property refurbished and you've got to pay for it on top of what they've done. So it's really, really important to look at the special conditions. And if you don't understand them, get somebody else to. One of the other things that often gets slid through is the reduction of the time after notice to complete. So notice to complete is usually 10 days. So if you don't complete...
For anyone who is maybe not understanding this, do you want to just clarify exactly what these mean?
So when you complete or you exchange at auction, you'll have 28 days generally. If you don't complete within those 28 days, they will then, the seller solicitors will then serve a notice to complete, for which you will pay them. And then that gives you then 10 days to complete. And if you don't complete within 10 days, that's where you lose your deposit. So thank you for giving, because as I said at the beginning, I find it hard that people don't understand. It's so long.
The rest of us mortals, we just need it in normal language.
So they will serve a notice to complete, and you'll have 10 working days to complete then.
So what you're saying is sometimes you think that you've got 28 days, but actually you might have less than that. So
often
28 days is already quite short, isn't it? Let's be fair.
Often they'll cut that in half, and you'll have 14 days to completion of the 28 days. You must remember they are calendar days, not working days.
Oh, really?
So they are, and for some reason the terminology changes. So it's 28 calendar days generally for completion, but when you serve a notice to complete, it's 10 working. And I never know why they don't do that. But in reality, you have 6 weeks to complete usually, which is adequate time. I won't say it's easy now because of lenders, and that brings us on to how you're financing it. But it's now increasingly common to reduce the time to 14 days between exchange and completion, between the auction and the completion date, which makes it 10 working days. And then to change the period to completion from 10 working days to 5 working days. So cut your time for completion in half.
Wow.
And that's it's not doable unless you have the money in the bank. It is not doable in today's climate.
It's cash, or because even bridging is not that quick anymore, is it?
Bridging can be longer. I've got a bridging loan I'm doing at the moment, and we've been on it 6 months.
No, don't tell me that. I'm still waiting for mine, as you know.
It's so ultimately what happens is, just because they've given you a bridging loan, it doesn't mean they'll lend on the property. They might have told you in principle you've got a bridging loan, but you haven't. You know, me or somebody like me is going to have to satisfy the bridger of the title, that they're happy with the title. If there is any squeak on that and they don't like anything, or there was something missing, or there wasn't a property information form and you have to answer all those questions, then they will all come back at you. They won't complete, they won't lend the money because they won't take a single risk. And what I've also seen recently in special conditions, which I have never seen before, so that's what I mean about learning things. This is a week or so ago. They have put any requisitions raised after the auction are being charged at an hourly rate for their solicitor. So if you then go back, and if I've got 7 pages of bridging lenders questions, which is not unusual, it can take me a whole day to answer those questions. I'm then going to pass at least half of them, maybe more, onto the seller solicitor. They're going to have to come back with those. You are then going to be paying them in excess of £300 an hour to answer those, plus VAT, plus any disbursements that they might need to do if they need to get extra documents or they need to go forward for something else. So never, you know, that doesn't make auctions cheap, but they are quick. The way the lenders have now changed with bridging is just ridiculous. You know, they're not prepared to take any chances at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for me, one of the things I do when I have an auction pack, opening a file is a lot of work, because if you haven't opened the file and you've been successful at the auction, you're 2 or 3 days before your solicitor can start, because we're not allowed to do anything until we've done all the anti-money laundering regulations. And so if we haven't done them, if you get a please do these, they need to be done now. And so it costs so much money in time to open the file. I then ask the client to make the payment and then get everything sorted out. We've lost a day or two. Generally, you can't start work straight away. You could be anybody, apparently, and then the lender will, the bridger will do the same.
Yeah.
So they could be another 2 days behind.
Yeah. And it does seem, doesn't it, that you have to be so careful, because you know, you've already mentioned numerous ways that a property that you've just seen on an auction, I don't know, let's say you know, guide price £100,000, suddenly there's so many more things potentially within the pack that could be costing you, I mean, I've heard absolute horror stories where, property is up for 50 grand, but there's 50 grand's worth of arrears in rental and things like that. And then what we're talking about is even in the conveyancing process, there could be absolutely considerable additional prices of this because they put these specific clauses in I mean, I suppose that you can sort of see they might put that in because they want people to do it quicker, but still, you've got to be absolutely, so incredibly careful.
And what other people don't take on board about bridging finances, the interest is usually taken out of the loan initially.
Yeah.
So if you think you've got a bridging loan and then they tell you they're going to take 10 grand out, where are you getting that 10 grand from? I've just had a lender solicitor charge my client £6,500 plus VAT.
Wow.
On legal costs. So you also remember you're paying your lender's legal costs.
Yeah.
That's going to be off that as well.
Yeah.
Because the lender won't let.
And that is as going back to that point, if you don't know what you don't know, and this is where so many people, and I've seen it so many times, they come back, I didn't know this. And unfortunately, in this kind of scenario, that is not an excuse because these things are being thrown at you. So it's so much better to, rather than go, I think it might be nice to buy at auction, they seem to be cheap. You've really got to understand the implications. And this is why I'm so excited that Joy's offering this service, because it really ensures that people can really start to really educate themselves a bit more. And on top of that, what I think is, really special about you, Joy, is you are an investor yourself. So there's loads of conveyancers out there, but you really understand the ins and outs of what is a good deal, what is not, and all of those things. So, from your perspective as an investor as well, I mean, do you approach evaluating properties for auction versus perhaps traditional purchases? Do you evaluate them differently?
No, I would be just as thorough on an auction as I would on an ordinary purchase. My concern generally with auctions is about the funding, and that people understand that it's, just because a bridge has told you they might give you some money, they're going to want to go and do an evaluation. That's the other thing. We all know how long valuations are taking now. You could get a down valuation on an auction, although that's less likely on an auction to get a down valuation because it's been on the market and it's been bid for. So the issue, so you can argue that it is the market value because that's the best price it would fetch at auction. And that's a harder one. I've never seen a down valuation on an auction property, but there's always the first time. But there's also the queue for surveyors and valuers. So an auction I was acting for a client selling recently, the valuer didn't come out until 2 days before the auction was due to complete. So I had to serve a notice to complete, obviously.
Yeah.
And it just he there was just no way that he was ever going to complete on time. I knew that from day one, but that's a different story. But it's sometimes that because the questions that are asked of you, and you go, and there are bargains to be had in auctions. All those bad things that are said, I spent some of my career working for the local authority, and we used to auction the old people's. So I worked for the department, or I worked for the legal department, and we'd be seconded to work for people who were where old folk had been gone into a home and they had no family, and we'd have to work on their house. They'd have to sell their house and things, and they'd have taken deputyship over it. And that would never be sold without an auction. There'd never be a pre-auction interest. There'd never be a pre-auction offer, and it would never be accepted. There would often be them, but they would never be accepted. If the local authority are selling, they'll never accept, because they're under duty to get the best price. So the valuation there is, is not likely to be down. But
yeah, sorry.
The lender might decide they don't want to lend on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this, I mean, do you feel that kind of the landscape has changed a little bit? So obviously for me, my comprehension of auctions was that they were always some kind of problem property, or, an absolute desperation that it really needs to go quickly. But then we did have a sort of a period, didn't we, sort of just post the sort of pandemic time, where, actually auction properties were getting higher than the open market at some stage. Now, I think all of that has definitely calmed down now.
Yeah.
But do you still think that generally there might be some kind of problem and they're trying to sort of chuck it through the auction? Or do you think people are actually turning more and more to putting properties in auction just for the timescales?
So there are 2 or 3 reasons, maybe more, that I would want to find out. So sometimes people will go put them in an auction because they think everybody wants it, which is often not the case.
I see. So you think rather than having just loads and loads of people fighting for it, that may raise the price because they're all stuck in a room.
Some people, the buyer expectation occasionally is too high, and they think, oh, well, we're going to buy it. We're going to do this. Actually, people really have to want it. Fred Blogs in the street, the man on the Clapham omnibus, whoever you want to call him, he has to really want it to buy at an auction or have the cash. So you're not, if there is competition for it, it's going to be a really special property, and that may be right. I'm not saying it's never, but that's the first one to discount. Why is it in the auction? Is it a really special property? Is there likely to be loads of competition for it? And we have houses like that around here. And I'm sure you do where you live as well, in the sense that if it was in a big plot and somebody wanted it as what I would call their death nest. And there was their death nest. I.e., it's my forever house. I'm never going to move. I'm going to die here. and they're gonna spend lots and lots of money doing it up. You can't compete with that. And if that's that in that thing, then I'd say leave it. The next one is that they want certainty. They don't. It's the second most stressful thing in your life is moving house, and I just want certainty. I just want them to, and it's an empty house stood there, and I just won't get rid of it. I don't want anything to do with it. And there's nothing wrong with the title. They're just tired, or just don't want to go through the hassle. The third reason is that there's something wrong with the title.
Okay.
And stick it in an auction, get rid of it quickly, and nobody will notice.
So what is there an example of what might be wrong with it that you've seen and experienced?
Yeah. So I had somebody once who had bought, he got really antsy with me because he bought this plot of land, and I'd bought it, and I'd reported to him and told him everything. And there was a pipe through the middle of this land, and half the plot said you couldn't build over this pipe, but the other half didn't. So I thought, well, it won't make any difference because they can't enforce it on the whole plot. And I'd said that to him, but he'd then gone and said to somebody else, I've been told to put it in an auction to get rid of it quickly. And I said, you could do that, yeah, but how's this going to happen? You know, I told you half of it you can and half of it you can't without the consent, and they're not going to give me consent to build on it. So something like that, where the whole pipe is within the property, you'd stick it in quickly and get rid of it, because you wouldn't want to divert a drain, maybe, or a gas main. That's another really good one. You know, you've got you can't build for a certain amount of meterage either side of a gas main, and it runs through the middle of the plot, building plot. So be careful of that. But the main reason and the most effective ones are there's no rights of way.
Right.
It's like we looked at an auction pack. I think you were there, in Auction Club the other week, where the property was a terrace built end onto the road, and there were no rights of way to get to the property from the main road. So if a property doesn't abut, isn't right on the road, the entrance to the property, you've got to make sure you've got rights of way over the land to get there. And it's no good saying one of the favourite ones is they go, oh, there's a right of way because I can see it. It's a footpath that you've walked over. It's not a legal right of way. Yes, it might be there because of long use, but it might not be as well. So that's a really good one. There's no rights of way, can't get to it, it's landlocked. And I could write you an essay on the ways you could get your rights of way, and it's probably not it's probably not unsolvable, but they've probably got fed up with people going, there's no rights of way, so let's stick it in an auction and get rid of it. The favourite to put in an auction to get rid of is a defective lease. And that is a whole different story. We're not going to get.
So do you mean like a commercial lease there? Is that what are we looking
Well, it could be a commercial lease, but most commercial leases are easily solvable. The residential leases that go in are not usually easily solvable. So one of the things that people will do is put in residential leases where the freeholder is absent and there is no management company. The building is very likely to be uninsured.
Oh.
Well, nobody can insure it.
Yeah.
So if there isn't a management company and there isn't a freeholder, the freeholder each person can't insure their individual flat because mortgage companies, because lenders don't like that. So that's out. Short leases will go in auction sometimes. Properties with defective rent review clauses may go in auction sometimes. They have to be ones with bankrupt, where you're bankrupt and your lease is forfeited, that could go in. I imagine now, and I haven't seen one lately, but I would be telling clients to do that if you've got huge ground rents, because lenders aren't lending on certain ground rents now. That would go in. There was another one. Just general where the leasehold isn't working, i.e. there's a rubbish management company, there are problems there. They just want rid of it because they're just getting to the end of their tether. So that would be a good reason to put it in.
So we have talked a little bit doom and gloom here, which is really important, obviously. And the reason we're doing that is we want to make sure that people, purchase with the full knowledge of what they're jumping into,
Yes.
what are the solutions. And that's what we do, and that's what Joy and I spend hours chatting about. How can we solve this problem?
Yes.
And that's how for us, as what we would define as more professional property investors, where we find problems and we're able to solve them. So with that in mind, do you kind of still think that property auctions are a viable strategy for investors?
I absolutely do, especially if you've got the funding, or you can negotiate a longer time. So if you go to the auctioneer, you can say, look, I'd love to do this, I'd love to buy it, but I can't complete in that time scale. Can I have a bit longer?
Yeah.
Most people will often do that. I did that myself with property that we had to get rid of because some issues in lockdown, and he said, can I have 2 months instead of 1? And I said, if you pay me that extra bit, yes. And so we got rid of the property that way. There will be, so if you can make it longer, yes. If you've got JV partners, or you've got the money yourself, then yeah, as long as the money's in the account and you can do it, it's a great way to make money. Especially now, I think at our local auction only sold, I think it was 40 something% of the lots this week.
Wow.
Whereas they've been up at 90 and something%. And one of the things they do is they'll withdraw them prior to, if nobody's registered to bid.
Just so that it doesn't look as bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were lots withdrawn prior as well. So in fact, one that we were looking at last week was withdrawn prior to the auction. And so that's a great, but ultimately, never discount the ones if you've bid and not got it. Speaking to the auctioneer afterwards, putting a bid in before. Now, I've already told you who won't take the bids before, i.e. local authorities.
Yeah.
Anybody under a duty to get the best price will not take a bid prior to auction. But everybody else may well do that. You may be able to get some of the constructive things. People may accept options and things, particularly after the auction, if it's been through a couple of times and it hasn't sold. That may be a no or low money down strategy. And there are just some cracking properties. If you're title splitting and you can see the potential, most people don't want great big houses now. They don't want great big gardens. If there are great big houses with great big gardens in an auction, how can you make it work for you?
Love it.
How can you fund it? And that's the way forward.
And this is very serendipitous, because I am literally, after our conversation, going to be packing up, and at 2:30 I am looking at an auction property, and I don't look at them so often. I like to go post if they're not selling, then certainly I'm thinking, well, this has got some more opportunities, like you've spoken about. But since obviously I brought you on to talk about your subscription service, the Auction Queen subscription service, it really has opened my eyes, because before I just, me, I'm not one, I can't read like a book like this, and I'm just, oh no, I mean, I'm Audible all the time. I'd have to have all my auction packs on Audible with a little thing that said ask question here, ask question here, because it's just like a block of words. Oh no, can't be bothered with that. It makes me feel like I'm at uni again. And that was just, so just so tell people how they can find you, and what this I know you sort of touched on it, but what this Auction Queen Club subscription service looks like.
So Auction Queen Essentials, you can find it by contacting me directly, finding me on Facebook, and I will either send you a link, or the link is on my biography, on my profile on Facebook. So Auction Queen Essentials is just £47 a month, and that gives you a full 2 hours a month with me, and a private Facebook group which you could ask questions in. Auction Queen Standard will give you the same 2 hours, but it'll also give you up to 2 30-minute sessions with me personally, which is £297. And Auction Club Gold, which isn't yet live but will be live later, is to work with me for 3 months, and that's 3,000, and that's and that is working with me, having my WhatsApp support during working hours. I switch my do not disturb on, and that's an hour. That's half an hour a week. But I'm not a clock watcher, which is probably to your benefits rather than mine. But that's half an hour a week with me, and both Auction Club Standard and Auction Club Gold also give you 10% off all your legal fees as well. So
wow,
that's it. Unfortunately, I'd like to be able to say I can do that off the stamp duty land tax, but I can't. So always remember the stamp duty land tax, and particularly put it into your auction.
Yeah, amazing.
But certainly, either contact you or myself, and we can you can soon back people to me, and make friends with me on Facebook, and I can certainly let you have the link.
Perfect. Yeah, so we'll pop underneath these lives the link that takes you through to Joy's website, and that will give you all of that information. And so, in fact, I've spoken to a number of people, and the feedback has been, Joy, that, you know, again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but people just, you don't know what you don't know. And especially when you're looking at a pack, you know, I've squizzed through, you know, a number of them, and then I've obviously brought them to you, and you're then pointing out things. And I'm like, really? Like, I just did not see that. It just did not crop up as thinking that it may be a problem. And that's where I think that people can, you know, get into trouble when they don't know these things. So yes. An incredible opportunity. And then on top of that, I think you're just so personable, Joy. It's really nice because you understand the property investing side as well. You really are looking at it from both sides, whereas just purely
I do try to look at all the bits and pieces that everybody doesn't think you look at, you know. And one of my things is solicitors will do what you expect them to do, not what you tell them to do. We'll do what you tell them to do, not what you expect them to do. Sorry. And I try and do what you expect me to do. So the auction pack I'm looking at the moment, it backs onto a railway track. Now, the property information form says that there is no knotweed, but I know that knotweed was used to bind railway banks up, so I'm going to tell the client that.
Wow, I didn't know that.
The British Rail people planted it.
They've got a lot to answer for then.
They planted it to hold the banks together, so there was no landslips.
Wow, I did not know.
So if there is, you know, and I know that, so why wouldn't I pass that on to a client? That wouldn't necessarily happen with somebody who wasn't a property investor.
Yeah, no, that's just so key. Brilliant, Joy. Well, look, thank you so much for coming and joining us. We really, really appreciate you sharing that. I'm so thrilled that the Auction Queen subscription club is now live and has been for a while now. It's so valuable. So if anyone is looking to purchase by auction and not only wants, obviously to have their legal pack read, but actually really wants to understand it and really start growing their knowledge, then absolutely Joy is the number one person. I'm not sure there's really anyone out there doing the same. So it's really generous that what she's doing. And I know she absolutely loves doing it too. So Joy, yeah, over to you, sort of a last closing words, please.
Just, if you're buying auctions, make sure you got your money in order. I couldn't, if that was anything you leave this with, make sure you've got your money in order.
Amazing. Okay, guys, so I'll be back again next Monday. So do remember to join us. And as I say, do go over and look at Joy's website and and join up. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Bye.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.